Hello and welcome to Wavescan, the international DX program from Adventist World Radio. Happy New Year to you. It's 2015 and our focus on Wavescan this year is going to be on the South Pacific. This program was researched and written in Indianapolis by Dr. Adrian Peterson and produced in the studios of WRMI Shortwave in Okeechobee, Florida. I'm Jeff White. Today on Wavescan, focus on the South Pacific, New Caledonia, and its American radio station. The story of Australian shortwave call signs, VLA. Our Japan DX report, and our special QSL of the week, Cyclone Emergency in Australia. Wavescan presents Focus on the South Pacific, a year-long series of reports on radio broadcasting and listening in the South Pacific. A French island with a Scottish name in the South Pacific that was discovered by an Englishman, and it was overwhelmed with a temporary American population far larger than its own citizenry. That was New Caledonia. This tropical island lies 750 miles off the east coast of Australia. It has a richer biodiversity of birds, animals, and vegetation than what the noted English naturalist Charles Darwin discovered in the Galapagos Islands. And it's the locale for a homeborn population that speaks more than 40 local languages. This French territory of New Caledonia encompasses more than 250 islands, 40 of which are inhabited, and the main island, narrow and long, could be described on a map as looking like a wriggly worm swimming towards New Zealand. The original inhabitants of New Caledonia were the Lapita people, who it is said arrived from Taiwan 2,000 and 3,000 years ago. Their culture had developed an ornate form of pottery that was discovered by two American archaeologists at more than 30 sites in New Caledonia. Captain James Cook, an explorer with the Royal Navy in England, was the first European to sight New Caledonia, and this was on his second voyage to the South Pacific in 1774. He named the island New Caledonia, a Latin name for Scotland, because the terrain he saw reminded him of Scotland. The first French visitor was Jean-François de Galaup, with the French frigates Astrolabe and Boussole in 1788. For more than half a century, there was very little European contact with New Caledonia, but from 1840 onwards, the Europeans developed a greater interest in this island due to its highly desirable sandalwood, and also mineral mining, in particular nickel. Christian missionaries from England came to New Caledonia in the mid-1800s, and they stated that cannibalism was rampant among the local Kanaka peoples, much of which was involved with ceremonialism. Under orders from Napoleon III, Admiral Février de Pointe took formal possession of New Caledonia as part of the French Empire in the Pacific on September 24, 1853. And Noumea, the capital city, was officially founded on June 25th of the following year, 1854. For the next half-century, New Caledonia served as a penal colony for French criminals who were imprisoned there for varying periods of time. After the fall of France during the European War in June 1940, the General Council in Noumea opted to support the Free French, and the pro-Vichy governor was forced out of office. He retired to French Indochina. With cooperation from Australia, New Caledonia became an important Allied base during World War II, and the first convoy of 15 large American Navy ships arrived on March 12, 1942. During the Pacific War, more than 1 million American service personnel were staged through New Caledonia. At the time, the total population of the island was only 250,000. The Americans built up the harbor facilities at Noumea, and they erected 85 steel warehouses to accommodate all of the incoming supplies for their forces in the South Pacific. The medical facilities for the American Navy included 2 hospitals in Noumea, each with a capacity of 2,000 beds. 2 airfields were developed, one at Tontuta, 35 miles north of Noumea, and the other at Magenta Bay, across the waterway from Noumea. The first radio broadcasting station on the air in New Caledonia for the benefit of Forces personnel was a small unit that was installed in the International Red Cross building in Noumea. The equipment for this medium-wave station was bought in Australia, and it was launched on September 5, 1943. This informal broadcasting station in Noumea was taken over by American Forces personnel and then replaced by an official American station in January of the following year, 1944. This station, initially identified on air as All Services Radio, ASR, though this title was soon afterwards changed to AES, the American Expeditionary Station, and sometimes the Allied Expeditionary Station. When official call signs in the WV and WX series were allocated to the American Forces entertainment stations throughout the world, the official call sign for Noumea became WVUS. At this time, all of the American Forces stations around the world were identified under the same group nomenclature, AFRS, Armed Forces Radio Service. Back at that time, 3 AFRS stations were set up quite simultaneously in the South Pacific. The first 2 were at Guadalcanal and Bougainville in the Solomon Islands, with WVUS in Noumea, New Caledonia, as the third. And this was followed quite quickly by another station located at Espiritu Santo in the New Hebrides. However, as it was stated, the medium-wave WVUS in the same Red Cross building in Noumea was better equipped than the 2 other stations located at Guadalcanal and Espiritu Santo. Station WVUS Noumea, with its 1-kilowatt transmitter on 965 kilohertz, acted as the main station in what became known as the Mosquito Network, a group of similar isolated stations in various islands of the South Pacific. The programming on each station was normally produced locally or taken off live shortwave broadcasts from the United States. However, in November 1944, a special program produced at WVUS Noumea was picked up off-air and relayed live by 3 other stations in the Mosquito Network: WVUQ Guadalcanal, WVUR Espiritu Santo, and 1ZM Auckland in New Zealand. Radio station WVUS in the Red Cross building in Noumea was closed in November 1945, and the transmitter was flown to Guadalcanal, where it was reconditioned and installed for station WVUQ. However, a new WVUS was inaugurated at the airport at Tontuta, 35 miles north of Noumea, in the same month, November 1945. This new station, with different equipment, operated with the same power, 1 kilowatt, and on the same channel as the previous WVUS. However, this station was now under the control of the United States Air Force, and it was no longer a part of the informal Mosquito Network. This new WVUS was on the air for less than a year, and it was closed at the end of the broadcast day, Saturday night, June 15th of the following year, 1946. However, a weekly Australian radio magazine for November 2nd, 1946, reported in its radio news column that 3 AFRS stations in the South Pacific, each previously closed, were heard in New Zealand in late September, including the comparatively new WVUS at the American Air Force Base at Tontuta in New Caledonia. Radio station WVUS on New Caledonia was often heard with a good signal by international radio monitors in New Zealand and Australia, and at least one QSL is known. The noted Arthur Cushion in New Zealand reported in a book he wrote, The World in My Ears, that he received a prepared QSL card from this station during the era of the Pacific War.
You're listening to Wavescan from Adventist World Radio. Send your comments and reception reports to Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229 in the United States. That's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229 in the USA. Or you can email us at wavescan@awr.org. Our email once again, wavescan@awr.org.
Well, in our program today, we present the first topic in a series of shortwave call signs in Australia. Each of these call signs begins with the two letters VL, followed by another letter in the English alphabet, in progressive order from A to Z. Here today, as we begin this long sequence of interesting radio information, Ray Robinson presents the fascinating story of the call sign VLA.
Back more than 100 years ago, 4 wireless stations were under construction in New Zealand. The electrical equipment for these 4 coastal communication stations was manufactured by the Telefunken Company in Germany, and German technicians were performing the installation procedures under the auspices of the Australasian Wireless Company in Sydney, Australia. The first of these 4 wireless stations, at least in alphabetical order, was located at the edge of Doubtless Bay, near Awanui, right at the very top of the North Island of New Zealand. This new wireless station was installed on a 100-acre site. The triangular milled steel antenna tower weighed 60 tons, and it stood 400 feet high, resting on a ball and socket joint in a glass insulator, and a 70-horsepower motor generated the electricity. Both the receiver and the transmitter were installed in the same building, though in separate rooms. This new wireless station was activated on March 27, 1913, under the original call sign NZA. And yes, Jeff, I'm sure you would say NZA, but since this is in New Zealand, where they pronounce the last letter of the alphabet as Z, that's what I'm saying, NZA, which stood for New Zealand Station A at Awanui. It was taken into regular service at the end of the same year on December the 18th, and by that time the call sign had been modified from NZA to VLA due to new international wireless regulations. In 1924, the electrical equipment at station VLA was changed from spark gap operation to electronic valve or tube operation. Then in 1927, the call sign was again amended, this time from VLA to ZLA, due again to a change in international radio regulations. The station was closed on February the 10th, 1930, when its communication service was no longer needed. And then a few months later we find the call sign VLA being reused on Bruny Island, which is a small island located near the southeast coast of the Australian island state of Tasmania. The island is very rugged and its shape is very irregular, and in reality it's more like 2 separated islands joined by a very narrow isthmus. Bruny Island is named in honour of the French explorer Bruni Entrecasteaux. When Europeans first came to the area, the twin islands were inhabited by a small tribe of Tasmanian Aborigines. A landmark lighthouse, now a tourist attraction, was built in 1838 at the very bottom tip of South Bruny Island, facing Antarctica. A small communication radio station was installed in the lighthouse in 1930, and the first entry in the logbook is dated June the 1st. 8 years later, the equipment at the radio station was updated with the installation of a pedal wireless transmitter, which was powered by a generator attached to a stationary bicycle. A brief report in an Australian radio magazine, dated in August 1941, gives the call sign for this small communication radio station at the Bruny Island Lighthouse as VLA, and it operated just above the standard medium wave band, as it was at the time, on 1579 kHz. During the war, the call sign VLA was unassigned from the little communication radio station on Bruny Island and held in readiness for a powerful 100 kilowatt shortwave transmitter that was under construction for installation at Shepparton in Victoria. 3 transmitters at 100 kilowatts each were envisaged for deployment at Shepparton, and the planned allocation of call signs was VLA, VLC and VLM. The driver and preliminary stages for the new VLA transmitter were constructed in Australia by AWA, and the modulator and final stages were constructed by STC, the Standard Telephones and Cables Company, both in suburban Sydney. The VLA transmitter, with its 2-channel input allowing for quick frequency change, was activated on August 13, 1945, and it was taken into scheduled service 2 days later on August 15th. A suffix number after the call sign, such as VLA3, VLA6 or VLA8, indicated a specific frequency for on-air usage. Beginning on June 1, 1951, the usage of the suffix numbers was modified so that the number itself indicated a particular megahertz band. In 1961, the VLA transmitter was bifurcated, and with the insertion of additional electronic equipment, a complete new transmitter became available. This new unit was identified on air under the call sign VLF. The original VLA transmitter was withdrawn from service in 1983. Also at the end of 1961, the same year in which VLA was bifurcated, Radio Australia dropped the usage of official call signs, and instead the term VLA began to be used to identify a specific program line from the Melbourne studios to the transmitter site at Shepparton. To this day, the identification A, or VLA, still refers to the specific program line that runs to Shepparton and not necessarily a specific transmitter. Radio Australia was a prolific verifier of reception reports, and literally thousands of QSL cards under the call sign VLA were posted out to listeners all around the world. During the quarter century when this call sign was in vogue, 2 different QSL cards were in use, though half a dozen slight variations are known. The first card was in use from 1946 to 1950, and it depicted a map of Australia in yellow with a stylized antenna. The second card, which was in use during the 1950s, depicted a more detailed map with the famous laughing bird, the kookaburra. This second card had 2 major variations, one with the station name in yellow and the other with the station name in red. Form letter QSLs were issued for a few years during the 1990s, giving the usage of the line call sign VLA together with the frequency and transmitter location as Shepparton.
Thank you very much, Ray. Ray Robinson of KVOH in Los Angeles. Next on Wavescan today, we go to Yukiko Tsuji in Tokyo with her first DX report for the new year.
Hello and welcome to the DX Report of the Month from Japan Shortwave Club, aided by Toshi Otake, and I'm Yukiko Tsuji. The first topic is RMRC, Rhein-Main Radio Club's special transmission reporting about EDXC 2014 conference. The first broadcast was aired on 13th of December from Sitkunai transmitter in Lithuania to Asia and Japan on 11690 kHz, but the signal was very weak. So its retransmission was made on 27th of December from the same transmitter from 2200 to 2300 UTC on 9585 kHz. This time, the program was heard with SIMPO rating of 35222, then down to 25222. The same program with interviews of EDXC attendees by Toshi Otake was broadcast on 15th of December from WRMI, Florida, to Americas and Europe. We have several DX reports from our club members this week. Hulun Bear People's Broadcasting Station from Haila, China, was heard on 3900 kHz on December 5th from 10:06 to 10:32 UTC in Chinese. SIO rating was 332, then up to 433. Talk program was on the air, and ID was given at 10:26. At 10:30, the relay of Neimeng PBS started. Xinjiang People's Broadcasting Station from Urumqi, China, was heard on 3950 kHz on December 9th from 1548 to 1605 UTC in Chinese. SIO rating was 353, then down to 352. ID was given at 1558. Deutsche Welle via Yerevan, Armenia, was received on 17800 kHz on December 3rd from 0700 to 0730 UTC in English. SIO rating was 353. The program heard was news, followed by Africa Link. Vatican Radio was heard on 21560 kHz on November 30th from 0955 to 1010 UTC in Portuguese. SIO rating was 353. The relay of mass was aired. Radio Rwanda was heard on 6055 kHz on December 4th from 1930 to 1950 UTC. SIO rating was 342. French talk program was broadcast until 1933. Then news in English started. French program resumed at 1945. The Overcomer Ministry via WRMI USA was received on 5850 kHz on November 30th from 0800 to 0820 UTC in English. SIO rating was 252. ID of WRMI was given, followed by Overcomer programs. Global 24 from Okatovi, USA was heard on 9395 kHz on December 10th from 1250 to 1310 UTC in English. SIO rating was 343. ID was given at 1300 clearly. The reception condition has been relatively better these days. Radio Gaucha from Porto Alegre, Brazil was heard on 11915.2 kHz on November 30th from 2205 to 2237 UTC in Portuguese. SIO rating was 332. The relay of soccer match was broadcast. Finally, Japan Shortwave Club will issue the QSL cards for the correct reports on our segment of Wavescan program. We are issuing QSL card by email to the report sent by email. Our address for your email report is jswcqsl@live.jp. I repeat, jswcqsl@live.jp. We continue to issue the printed QSL card by the same system as before. Your report should be addressed to JSWC P.O. Box 44, Kamakura, which is Kamakura, postal code 248-8691, Japan. $1 ILC or $2 for return postage will be appreciated. For this edition of DX Report, we would like to thank Mr. Iwao Nagatani, Mr. Yasuharu Tanabe, Mr. Tetsuya Toriumi, Mr. Mitsunori Kawazoe, and Mr. Chiaki Shimoda for sharing the information with us. Thank you for listening, and please join us for our next edition of DX Report of Japan Shortwave Club. I'm Yukiko Tsuji in Tokyo.
Thank you, Yukiko. Our special QSL of the week is Cyclone Emergency in Australia. International radio monitor Tony Ashar in Indonesia tells us that he heard a special broadcast over Radio Australia with emergency programming beamed to northern Queensland during Cyclone Yasi in 2011. At the time, local medium wave coverage was off the air in the stricken areas, and Radio Australia Shepparton carried the state and regional programming from Brisbane with 100 kilowatts on 6080 kHz. The large ABC QSL card received by Tony Ashar presents a map of Australia with all of the medium wave stations shown at their actual locations. Noted Australian International Radio Monitor Ian Johnson signed the card on behalf of Radio Australia. We end today's edition of Wavescan with Ko Eraso, a song called Living Together. That's from New Caledonia, sung by OK Rios. You've been listening to Wavescan, the international DX program from Adventist World Radio, researched and written in Indianapolis by Adrian Peterson. Next week, the Philippine radio story, Press Wireless returns to the Philippines, Part 2. The world's smallest radio station. And our special QSL of the week is Benin. Hard to find, hard to hear, and difficult to QSL. Also our Philippine DX report. Several QSL cards are available for your reports on Wavescan. Send your AWR and KSDA reception reports for Wavescan to the Adventist World Radio address in Indianapolis that we'll give you momentarily, and also to the station your radio is tuned to, WWCR or KVOH or WRMI, or to the AWR relay stations that carry Wavescan. Remember, too, you can send a reception report to each of the DX reporters when their segment is on the air here in Wavescan, from Japan, Bangladesh, the Philippines, Australia, and India. They will verify with a colorful QSL card of their own. Return postage and an address label are always appreciated. Our Wavescan address is Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229, USA. That's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229, USA. Our email address is wavescan@awr.org. That's wavescan@awr.org. I'm Jeff White at WRMI in Okeechobee, Florida. Till next time, good listening, everyone.